Thank you for joining us. We're going back and looking at the Torah portion for this week, Vayechi, and he lived, and we were actually in Psalm 83. And the reason we went there is because in the first verse of this Torah portion, you had a couple of numbers that leapt off the page. And the reason that it's important for us to see this is because in these numbers, Yahweh is giving us some prophetic insight regarding what's about to happen in the days in front of us. And while I was looking at it, I was also drawn to Psalm 83. And Psalm 83 deals with a confederacy of 17 nations, 7 from the past, 10 that are in the future. And those 17 nations will very vividly reveal to you not only how he's worked against the enemies of Israel in the past, but how he's going to treat them in the future. We've already looked at 9 of the first 10. Let's look at the last one. Ashur, Strong's number 804, and of course the Strong's Concordance defines it as a step. It's actually related to 833, Ashar, which means to go straight, to advance, to set upright, which is the exact root word of the word Israel, or Yishar'el, those who walk upright before Yahweh. Now, why are we looking at these 10 nations? As I said earlier, that number 17 is giving you some prophetic insight regarding what is about to happen in the future. And so by looking at these 10 names, the definition of these 10 names, as I give them to you, and hopefully you're able to see it, here it is. Adam, remember the word Edom? Also known as the blooded one, the covenant one, a.k.a. Messiah Yeshua. Adam will hear me and make desolate those whose father is the wanderer. He, the wanderer, will cross boundaries to diminish the people. I will ring him off. I can hear the tone of the voice of Yahweh in this. I don't think he's pleased. I will ring him off and sever him, causing great distress to those who would be an adversary to the upright people before Yahweh. Well, who are this upright people? Yishar'el, Israel, those who are part of the house of Yahweh in the last days. Now, if you continue to look, you see that verses 10 through 12 follow with 7 enemies which have already been destroyed in days previous. I want to look at those 7 nations to get further insight regarding what has already happened and what Yahweh is challenging you with now. See, this Torah portion is telling you, it's very plain, the house of Israel is going into bondage. There's going to be a serious famine that will cause them to sell themselves into bondage. And then for 430 years, they will prostitute themselves to fallen gods. And let me share this with you. We have a tendency to denigrate the house of Israel and say, well, I'd never go there. Are you hearing me? But when you're put in a severe hardship, you have absolutely no idea, unless you've been there, what you were capable of. Did you know that science teaches, based on past history and examples, some in recent history, that the average individual after 3 days without food will resort to cannibalism? Did you hear what I just said? Turn to your neighbor and tell them the average individual will resort to cannibalism after 3 days of starvation. Did you hear that? Now that's important because there is a famine coming. And the famine, according to Amos 8:11, is a famine of hearing the word. Would you say, I'm glad you said that, because I'd never physically eat another human. Well, I'll tell you this much. If there is a spiritual famine, you will bite and devour those that are around you. We do it already, and there's not even a famine. And the indictment has just been served against us. Did you hear me? Now, the word Midian, beginning in verse 10 through 12, Psalm 83. If you look at it, Strong's number 4080, you'll see again there is a mem attached to the front of it. The mem indicates from or out of, and then you have the latter part of the verse. The root is the word din, and that means strife and contention. And finally, you have the name Sisera. The Strong's Concordance defines it as battle array. Well, if you break it apart as we are accustomed to doing, and I know you're wondering, who gave you the right to do that? Well, the Torah does. Amen. 2 Timothy 2:15 tells me to do just that. Study to show yourself approved unto Yahweh, workmen that need not to be ashamed, by rightly dividing the word of truth. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm just dividing it, dissecting it, opening it up and looking at it. Turn to your neighbor and tell him, I wonder how he did that. If you break that word Sisera apart, it's Strong's number 5580, the root, and it's the word sas. Don't sauce me. That word literally means an insect or a worm that devours, and is used symbolically of what will devour the enemies of Israel. Now, if you notice on the end of it, you have the resh aleph. And if you're familiar with that word, it's the word ra'ah, which means to see, to perceive. So what this is telling you is that based on the history in this name, we will see the devouring of Israel's enemies. The very one that thought they would cut them off, we're going to see them severed and cut off. And let's look at the next name, Jabin. Strong's number 2985. Strong's has it, whom Yah observes. And by the way, he's watching you. It's taken from 995. The root is the word ben, which means to discern, to perceive, to observe. It's closely related to 997, bain, which indicates between and among, right in the middle. Are you following me? Now let's look at the word orel, Strong's number 6159. The Strong's defines it as the word raven. This particular consonantal root, the ayin, resh, and bait, has a variety of meanings depending on the vowel points. Let me just give them to you. It can mean raven, but it's also 6148, which means to exchange, to take something as a pledge. 6149, to be sweet and pleasant. 6150, to become dark as in the evening. That's the word erev. Same consonantal roots as this word. 6151, to mix, to mingle, to join, as in the word Arab, from whence we get the name Arabia. Let's look at the word Ziv, 2062. It's defined as the word wolf, but it's also closely related to 2077, and I have it down there twice, but I apologize for the typo. 2077 is the word Zibah, which means, if you pay attention on the end of it, you have the hay, which indicates pay attention or behold. And the word Ziv or Zibah literally indicates a sacrifice, something that is going to be slaughtered and killed. And then you have the word Zibah. You notice that it's repeated basically twice. Zibah and Ziv connote basically the same thing. When Yahweh repeats something, the emphasis is there to get your attention. Finally, you have in this confederacy of 7 nations that have already been destroyed by Yahweh, and he's put them there to show you the relationship between the children of Israel and what happened to them when they went into bondage, and how he would deliver them subsequently from their enemies. Let's look at the final nation, Zalamunah, Strong's number 6759. It literally is interpreted as deprived of protection or deprived of a covering. Now, if you'll take these 7 names, as we did the previous 10, and look at the individual definitions, this is what you could get. During the strife and contention, we will see Israel's enemies devoured, Yahweh observed, separating between us and pledging to mix and mingle the wolves at a great slaughter, their covering removed. Well, that's pretty important. That's just seen in the number 17. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. 17 also happens to be the numerical value of another very powerful piece of this puzzle, and it can be found in the Strong's numbers 2328 and 2329. Both of those words mean to encircle, to inscribe into or on a circle, much like you would the boundary line of the heavens, the vault of the roof of the heavens. And if you're familiar with that, we're talking about the constellational signs or the signs of the zodiac. So the number 17 is basically inferring that Yahweh has inscribed on the vault of the heavens, the ceiling of the heavens, something regarding this number 17. And number 17, as you've already seen, is extremely powerful because it's connecting us to a number of prophetic things that happened to Israel, including their bondage, what happened to them while they were in bondage and their deliverance, and what would happen to the nations that had aligned themselves against Israel. Can you say amen? After we looked at the number 17, you see that there's a number that follows it, and it's the number 147. It tells you Jacob lived precisely 147 years. Well, that's also interesting, because if you add up the simple gematria, 1 plus 4 is 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 is the number that's assigned to kingdom or governmental perfection. It also happens to be the number of the 12 tribes, the number of the 12 months, the number of the constellations in the stellar heavens. Is actually giving you some insight that Yahweh has assigned incremental portions of time. And each one of those were devoted to each one of the 12 tribes. And so, as you look at the number 147, he's telling you that each one of those 12 tribes, 12 nations, has a part in the restoration, redemption plan of Yahweh. Now, the gematria of 147 is the same as that of Strong's number 5326. That word is nisbah, which means strength and toughness, to stand upright, to be established. Turn to your neighbor and tell him, he's talking about me. The ability to hold together under difficult tasks. Isn't that powerful? That's what the number 147 is inferring. Jacob, when he was asked by Pharaoh about his life, he said, my life has been long and difficult, but yet he was able to hold together under a difficult task. Are you following me? That word nisbah is actually from the root of Strong's number 5322. That word is nes, and it's a noun that indicates flowers and blossoms, buds that will open up and form blossoms, and it's indicating fruitfulness. 147 also is closely related to Strong's number 6629, zoni or za'ani. And if you'll notice, you'll see the word zone right in the center of that. And the word zone means flock or sheep. And if you see the yod suffix, it's talking about my flock, my sheep. Well, 147 is also the gematria of another word you should be familiar with, and it's the word emunan. And the root of emunan is 530, emunah. Emunah means faith and faithful. So something about the number 147 taught us faith and faithfulness. These two numbers we've just looked at, 147 and 17, remind us of Genesis 15, where Yahweh told Abraham the message of his children, his generations, would be written in the heavens. And even though they would go into bondage 430 years, they would emerge a fruitful flock again, established, upright, faithful, and bless the earth. Now, there's another number. Remember, there's as much to be said by what's not there as what's there. If you look at the number 17 and 147, you can subtract one from the other, and you come up with another number. It's the number 130. That number's not seen, but yet it's there, and it's just as powerful. And it forces us to examine it. The number 130 has a gematria of a Hebrew word that you're going to see later on in this Torah teaching. And it's Strong's number 3717, kafal, and it's a verb that means to double. Did you hear what I said? The word to double, the phrase to double infers prosperity. But did you know it also infers resurrection? I don't know if I believe that. Well, let me ask you this. Do you remember Job? Do you remember that Job believed in the resurrection? And how many children did Job have? 10. And Yahweh gave Job double what Job had prior to his loss. Isn't that true? But if you will go back and read the entire book of Job, you'll find that Job was only given 10 more children. Yet Yahweh said, I will double you. 10 is not double of 10. So how could Yahweh be, in effect, doubling him when he only gave him 10 children to replace the 10 that were lost? It's because Job and Yahweh both are teaching you something about the power of resurrection. Those 10 children, though they were dead, shall live. And so you had 10 plus the second 10, that's inferring in the resurrection, Job's children would live again. Can you see that? And so in this word here, you're understanding this number 130 is inferring something about the resurrection, something about doubling, something about being made fruitful. Now that should be a source of encouragement if you're looking at it prophetically and you know that